Somebody asked for the cigars. We had talked long, and the conversation was beginning to languish. Tobacco smoke had settled heavily into the curtains, and wine had begun to settle heavily into the brains of certain men at the table. It was perfectly evident that unless something happened to rouse our oppressed spirits, the meeting would soon wind down, and we would all drift home to bed, and probably to sleep. No one had said anything particularly remarkable. Perhaps no one had anything remarkable to say. Jones had given us every detail of his last hunting trip in Yorkshire. Mr. Tompkins of Boston had explained at great length how the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad managed to extend its territory, increase its influence, transport livestock without starving them, and, more impressively, convince passengers that the corporation could transport human life without destroying it. Signor Tombola had tried to persuade us that the unity of his country was not like a modern torpedo, built with the skill of Europe's finest arsenals, only to be guided into political chaos by feeble hands. The conversation had reached proportions that would have bored Prometheus, driven Tantalus to despair, and persuaded Ixion to seek rest in the grammar exercises of Herr Ollendorf, rather than listen to another word. We were tired, bored, and nobody showed the slightest sign of rising from the table. Then somebody called for cigars. We all looked toward the speaker, Brisbane, a man of 35, known more for his physical gifts than for his charm. He was one of those deceptive-looking men, 6 feet tall, broad across the chest, strong of hand and sinew, who appear very strong, yet are even stronger than they appear. His features were unremarkable: small head, thinning hair, blue eyes, large nose, square jaw. Everybody knew Brisbane, and when he asked for a cigar, everybody listened.
"It is a very singular thing,"
said Brisbane. His voice cut through the air like a blade. The room fell quiet.
"It is very singular,"
he continued, lighting his cigar.
"That thing about ghosts. People are always asking whether anybody has seen a ghost."
A pause.
"I have."
There was a chorus of exclamations. Cigars were fetched. Champagne appeared. Brisbane settled himself to tell a story.
"I am an old sailor,"
he began,
"and I cross the Atlantic often. I have my favourite ships. Most men do. I was only ever cheated out of a good passage once in my life."
He described the warm June morning, the bustling pier, the sudden appearance of porters and brass-buttoned officials who seemed to materialize as soon as the steamer was ready. He boarded the Kamchatka, one of his favorite ships, and hailed a steward with a red nose and redder whiskers.
105, Lower Berth,
Brisbane said. The steward reacted in an odd way, wide-eyed, hesitant, yet said nothing. Brisbane followed him to the cabin. The room was ordinary enough: double lower berth, the usual washstand, the usual ill-designed racks, the blankets folded like cold buckwheat cakes, the sad-coloured curtains half-closing the upper berth. Nothing seemed strange. Brisbane tipped the steward, who thanked him, but with a peculiar tone, as if unsettled. Nothing else remarkable happened that day. The ship left on time. The weather was warm and the motion of the steamer brought a refreshing breeze. The first day at sea passed as they always do. Passengers pacing the deck, discovering acquaintances, wondering about the food, wondering about the weather, and retiring early to avoid seasickness. Brisbane turned in earlier than usual. To his annoyance, he discovered he would have a roommate. A tall, thin, pale man with sandy hair and colourless grey eyes. Overdressed, aimless-looking. The sort of man who frequented racecourses and expensive cafes without ever appearing to do anything there. Brisbane instantly decided he did not want to know him. He needn't have worried. He would never see the man again. Brisbane slept soundly until he was awakened by a sudden noise. His roommate had leaped down from the upper berth in one bound, rushed to the door, fumbled with the bolt, and then ran at full speed down the passage without closing the door behind him. Annoyed, Brisbane shut the door and returned to bed. But sometime in the dark hours, he woke again, feeling cold. The air was damp. The peculiar smell of a cabin that has been wet with seawater lingered around him. He thought his roommate must have returned and gone back to bed. Once he thought he heard the man groan. He fell asleep again, waking at grey dawn. The ship was rolling more heavily. The day was cold, unaccountably cold for June. Brisbane looked toward the porthole and saw, to his surprise, that it was wide open and fastened back. He cursed loudly, shut it, and dressed, glad to escape the damp stateroom. On deck he met the ship's doctor, a stout Irishman with black hair and blue eyes. Brisbane mentioned the cold and the open porthole. At the mention of his cabin number, 105, the doctor visibly started. Everyone, he said, had complained of that stateroom for the past 3 voyages, and then the doctor offered, insisted, to let Brisbane share his own cabin. Brisbane refused politely, but the doctor's warning stayed with him. Shortly after breakfast, the captain summoned Brisbane. His roommate had disappeared. Clothes still lying about. Berth unslept. No trace of him anywhere. Brisbane recounted the nighttime disturbance and the porthole incident. The captain listened grimly. Brisbane had unknowingly repeated the story told by the roommates of 2 previous passengers, both of whom had bolted from the upper berth in the night, run down the passage, and thrown themselves overboard. The captain begged him not to discuss the matter with passengers. A ship could acquire a reputation very easily. He offered Brisbane any officer's cabin he wanted. Brisbane refused. He would stay in 105.
If I had taken the captain's advice,
Brisbane said to us,
I would have had nothing more to tell.
Brisbane went to bed late. He discovered the porthole open again. Angry, he dragged the steward, Robert, to the cabin to scold him. But Robert insisted he hadn't opened it. He swore the porthole could not be kept shut at night. Brisbane shut it himself tightly. Robert said,
In half an hour it'll be open again, fastened back too. That's the horrible thing.
It sounded like drunken superstition. Brisbane promised him a sovereign if it opened again. He got into bed. The light was extinguished. He lay awake, staring toward the faint gleam of the porthole. An hour passed. A sudden cold draught. Spray on his face. He leaped up, was thrown by the ship's roll, and saw, unmistakably, that the porthole was once again wide open and fastened back. He closed it firmly, braced his stick through the loop, and bent the metal itself, trying to tighten it. Then, in the darkness, he heard movement in the upper berth. A faint groan. Brisbane tore back the curtain and thrust his hands into the berth. Something was there. Something cold, wet, slippery, like the arm of a drowned man. It sprang forward, heavy, clammy, horribly strong, knocking Brisbane back. The door flew open, and the thing rushed out into the passage. Brisbane followed but could not catch it. He saw only a dark shadow disappearing around the corner. He returned to the cabin. The place reeked of stagnant seawater. The porthole, open again. He lit his lantern. The upper berth was dry, but it had been occupied. He sat awake the entire night. The next morning, Brisbane told the doctor everything. The doctor refused to help investigate further. The captain, however, agreed to spend the night in 105. They had the carpenter dismantle the cabin, searching for loose boards or hidden panels. Nothing. The carpenter advised them to screw the door shut permanently. Brisbane insisted on one more night. That evening the captain joined him. They bolted the door. The captain sat on Brisbane's portmanteau, blocking the exit. Brisbane placed his lantern to shine into the upper berth. They waited. The captain began to recount the earlier incidents. The first man, known later to be insane, who ran out and threw himself overboard. The second man, who seemingly escaped through the porthole itself. The third. The captain stopped suddenly. The brass nut on the porthole was turning. Slowly. Very slowly. Brisbane watched it. It turned. He could move it with his fingers. It was loose. The captain told him the smell of seawater always returned to that room, no matter what they did. They both smelled it now, strong, putrid. Suddenly, Brisbane's lantern went out. The curtain of the upper berth swung forward with the roll of the ship. The captain cried out. He was struggling with the port, which was trying to open of its own accord. Brisbane jammed his stick into the loop, but it snapped in his hands. The port sprang wide open.
"There is something in that berth,"
the captain shouted. Brisbane leapt forward. He grabbed it. He touched, held, the drowned thing. A corpse with the strength of a giant, dead white eyes staring, hair hanging in wet, foul strings, the smell of the ocean graveyard all around it. He wrestled it. It wrapped its dead arms around his neck. He felt himself being overpowered, crushed. He cried out and fell. The thing sprang over him, onto the captain. There was a struggle, a blow, a cry. And then the thing vanished, seemingly out through the porthole, though the opening was far too small for any living creature. Brisbane lay senseless. When he awoke, he found his left arm broken. The captain lay beside him, stunned but alive. That was the end. The carpenter screwed 6 4-inch screws through the door of 105. If you book a passage on the Kamchatka, you will be told that particular stateroom is permanently engaged. It is. Brisbane finished the voyage in the surgeon's cabin. The captain quietly left the ship after that voyage, never to sail her again. Brisbane never sailed in her again either.
I was very badly frightened,
he concluded.
which is a thing I do not like. That is all. That is how I saw a ghost. If it was a ghost, it was dead, anyhow.